They say the office isn't a battlefield, that it's just business, not personal. But whoever said that never worked in marketing. My name's Rachel Moore, and for 8 years, I fought my way through the fluorescent-lit jungle of corporate life. I started as an assistant who fetched coffee and fixed slides at midnight. Now, I was finally where I'd always wanted to be, a marketing strategist for one of Chicago's biggest firms, Dalton & Co. Every morning, I walked through those glass doors with my head high, my heels clicking like applause on the marble floor. I had earned that sound. Every late night, every tear shed in a restroom stall, every "will let you know" that never came, it had all brought me here. And beside me through it all was Samantha Blake. Samantha joined the company 2 years after I did. She was everything I wasn't: effortlessly stylish, loud where I was quiet, and blessed with that kind of confidence that made people listen even before she said anything. From day one, she had that magnetic pull. Everyone liked her instantly, but somehow she liked me. "Rachel, you're my kind of person," she said on her first week, looping her arm through mine after a brainstorming session. "Smart, grounded, and not afraid to speak your mind. We're going to make a killer team." I believed her. Soon our desks were side by side. We worked late, ordered Thai takeout, laughed over bad bosses and impossible clients. She'd drop a compliment like candy: "You're the brain, Ratch, I'm just the sparkle." We were inseparable. Everyone called us the power duo. At least that's what I thought. It was around the time the Jefferson campaign came up that things started to shift. The Jefferson account was our white whale, the one the CEO, Mr. Dalton, wanted more than any other. The client had rejected our firm twice before, but now they were giving us one last shot. Whoever cracked it would become the company's new star. I stayed up for nights on end working on that pitch. I wanted it to be different, not another dull, data-heavy campaign. I wanted it to feel like a story, one that made people care. I remember sitting in my apartment at 2 a.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and color swatches, whispering to myself, "Come on, Rachel, you've got this." When the morning of the presentation arrived, I felt the kind of fear that's almost electric. Samantha walked beside me, smiling wide. "You're going to crush this," she whispered. Her voice had that soft, confident lilt, like she already knew I'd win. The boardroom was packed. Mr. Dalton, a man whose expression could turn steel to dust, sat at the head of the table. I clicked through my slides, poured my heart out, and when I finished, the silence was heavy, and then he stood up. "Brilliant work, Rachel," he said. "Finally, someone who understands the client's soul." My knees nearly gave out. Then he turned slightly and added, "And Samantha, I can tell the two of you make a powerful team. Keep it up." Samantha smiled sweetly, eyes glittering under the bright lights. "Thank you, Mr. Dalton," she said, her tone sugary smooth. "Rachel and I do make a great team." I laughed it off, thinking it was a harmless mix-up. After all, we worked together on everything. But something about her voice stuck in my mind. That night, we celebrated at a small wine bar around the corner. She raised her glass to me, saying, "To the Jefferson pitch, and to you, my brilliant partner in crime." We clinked glasses and I laughed, but then she leaned in and added quietly, "You're killing it lately, Ratch. Guess I'll have to up my game." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I brushed it off, friends tease. We were both ambitious, that's what made us good. But over the next few days, subtle things started to happen. Little shifts I couldn't quite name. In meetings, Samantha started finishing my sentences. Only she twisted them, adding her own flair, making it sound like the idea came from her. When the CEO complimented the campaign's storytelling, she said, "Rachel and I brainstormed it over dinner. We're such a creative pair." Except there had never been any dinner. Once I found her at my desk, scrolling through my drafts. "Just curious," she said, flashing that perfect smile. "Trying to understand your thought process." I told myself I was being paranoid. She was my friend. She'd never cross me. Still, there were moments when I'd catch her watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Admiration, maybe, or envy. I didn't know it then, but the same person who cheered for my success was already planning to use it for her own. Because in the corporate world, friendships are only safe until there's a promotion involved. And I was about to learn that the hard way. I've learned that jealousy doesn't walk into your life wearing a villain cape. It comes in soft laughter, inside jokes, and little phrases that sound harmless, until you start hearing what's underneath. That's how Samantha's change began. After the Jefferson pitch, the entire office started looking at me differently. Even Mr. Dalton began calling me by name in meetings, which, at Dalton & Co., was like being knighted. Suddenly, people wanted my input, my advice. For the first time, I felt visible. I'd worked in the shadows for years while others took credit. Finally, I wasn't invisible. And Samantha was right there beside me, smiling, applauding. At least on the surface. But the little things, they started to bother me. Like when someone said, "Rachel, your pitch saved that account," she'd reply with a laugh, "Well, I did help polish it up." Or when she started showing up to meetings early, already sitting in my chair. Tiny things that sound small when you tell them out loud, but when you live them every day, they start to burn. Then one afternoon, we had a brainstorming session for a new campaign. I was explaining my concept, a personal storytelling angle for a client known for their bland image. The team was engaged, nodding along. And then, in front of everyone, Samantha interrupted. "Actually," she said, tapping her pen on the table, "what Rachel means is we should tie it to customer emotion. That was my thought, remember?" Everyone nodded. I froze. She smiled at me sweetly, like she hadn't just hijacked my entire idea. I forced a laugh, pretending it didn't sting. Yes, emotional engagement, exactly. After the meeting, I pulled her aside. "Sam, why did you say it was your idea? You know that concept came from me." She blinked, tilting her head like I'd spoken another language. "Ratch, relax," she said. "We're a team. Does it matter whose idea it was, as long as we win?" It did matter, but saying that made me sound petty. So I smiled and let it go. That night, over drinks, she was back to her old self. "People are finally noticing us," she said, swirling her wine. "But be careful, the higher you climb, the more they want to push you off." Her words should have sounded like advice. But they felt like a threat. A week later, my manager, Kara, asked me to share progress on my next proposal. I opened my laptop, only to find that the folder I'd been working on was missing. Gone. When I asked it to restore it, the technician said casually, "Oh, Samantha already accessed that file this morning. She must have moved it to the shared drive." My heart stopped for a second. "Samantha." I walked to her desk. She looked up, smiling. "Hey, you're welcome," she said before I could speak. "I moved your proposal to the team folder so Kara could see how we're collaborating. Transparency, you know." Her tone was playful. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of triumph. For the first time, I felt a shiver of distrust. That weekend, I sat at home staring at my laptop, reworking every idea I had, backing up everything twice. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was survival instinct. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confront her directly. We'd been friends for too long. We'd shared heartbreaks, birthdays, secrets about exes and dreams. You don't want to believe that kind of bond can rot. So I convinced myself she was just ambitious, not cruel. I told myself it would pass. Then came the Jefferson launch celebration. The campaign we'd worked so hard for was finally live, and the numbers were exceeding expectations. At the party, Mr. Dalton took the stage, microphone in hand, champagne glass raised. "I want to recognize the woman behind this brilliant idea," he said. "Samantha Blake, your creativity pushed us to new heights." Applause erupted. Samantha stepped forward, glowing. I blinked. For a second, I thought he'd made a mistake, that he'd meant me. But Samantha smiled graciously, nodded, and said, "Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without my amazing team, especially Rachel." My name was an afterthought, a bone tossed to a loyal dog. The room blurred for a moment. I forced a smile, clapping with everyone else. My chest felt tight. When I caught her eye, she mouthed, "You okay?" And I realized she wasn't asking out of concern. She was taunting me. The following Monday, my desk was quieter than usual. People looked at me differently. Some smiled politely but avoided eye contact. Others whispered when I passed. I heard one of the interns say, "Samantha's the new favorite. Mr. Dalton's basically grooming her for management." That's when I knew. Whatever friendship we'd had, it was over. Still, I couldn't bring myself to strike back. Not yet. I wasn't going to play her game. I'd always believed that if you worked hard and stayed decent, things would balance out. But I was wrong. In the corporate world, good people don't win because they're good. They win because they're smart enough to see betrayal coming before it hits them. And I hadn't seen it soon enough. But I would. And when I did, Samantha Blake would wish she'd never learned my name. Some betrayals feel like thunder, loud, shocking, impossible to ignore. Others creep in quietly, like a whisper behind closed doors. Mine started with a smile. It was a Tuesday morning, gray skis, stale coffee, and that constant office hum that always made my head ache. I was running on 4 hours of sleep, polishing my presentation for Project Phoenix, a campaign I'd spent weeks crafting. This wasn't just another pitch. This was the one. If it landed, I'd finally be in line for a senior position. Mr. Dalton had even said, "This could be the next big milestone, Rachel." So when I walked into the conference room that morning, clutching my laptop like it was my lifeline, I felt hopeful. Samantha was already there. She flashed me that perfect, practiced grin. "Morning, Ratch, ready for the big day." "More than ready," I said, setting up my laptop. But when the meeting started, something felt off. Mr. Dalton clicked the projector remote, and my stomach dropped. The slides on screen weren't mine. Not exactly. They were a reworked version, my ideas, my language, my structure, but presented under Samantha Blake's name. "Sam, why don't you walk us through your new proposal?" Mr. Dalton said warmly. I froze. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Samantha stood, calm and composed, as she began speaking word for word, line for line, the concept I'd spent weeks building. The emotional hook, the narrative tone, even the client-specific tagline I'd written late one night while crying into a cup of cold coffee. Every single word. And she was calling it hers. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, "That's my work. That's my campaign." But the room was filled with senior executives, clients, and Mr. Dalton's expectant gaze. So I sat there, silent, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears, as Samantha smiled and gestured gracefully through the slides. When the presentation ended, applause filled the room. Mr. Dalton stood. "This is phenomenal, Samantha. This is exactly what we've been looking for." He turned to me and said, "Rachel, maybe you could assist Samantha with implementation. Support her team however you can." Support her. Her team. I felt the blood drain from my face. The meeting ended with a flurry of congratulations. I stumbled out into the hallway, numb, and caught her by the elevator. "Sam," I hissed, my voice shaking. "What the hell was that? That was my work, you know it." She looked at me, calm, unbothered. "Rachel, please," she said, lowering her voice. "Don't make a scene. We collaborated. You gave me notes, remember? You should be happy it went well." "Notes," I repeated, almost laughing. "You stole everything, the title, the layout, the—" "Rachel," she interrupted, leaning closer, her tone now cold. "This company respects results, not emotions. Maybe you should learn that." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, turned, and smiled. "Oh, and don't worry. I'll make sure you're credited somewhere in the appendix." The doors closed before I could speak. I stood there staring at my reflection in the mirrored panel. My own face looked unfamiliar, pale, hollow, betrayed. The next few days were hell. Rumors started to spread, whispers that I was losing focus, that I was burned out. People I'd trained avoided eye contact. My manager, Kara, who'd always been supportive, started forwarding me reminders about deadlines. Then, on Friday, I got called into Mr. Dalton's office. He didn't look angry, just disappointed. "Rachel, I've heard some concerns," he said. "Samantha mentioned you've been falling behind on deliverables. We can't afford mistakes right now." "Samantha said that," I asked quietly. "She's worried about you," he said, as if that made it better. "Maybe take a step back for a while, help her from the sidelines." It felt like being stabbed with a dull knife, slow and humiliating. By the time I left his office, my badge access to the Phoenix Project folder had already been revoked. That night, I stayed late after everyone left. The office was silent, lit only by the city glow filtering through the glass windows. I sat at my desk, scrolling through my old drafts, my old emails, proof that the campaign had started from my words, my vision. But I couldn't use any of it without making myself look desperate. In corporate war, proof doesn't matter if the audience already chose their hero, and Samantha was theirs. When I finally walked out into the cold Chicago night, I promised myself something. If she wanted a war, she was going to get one. But not the kind she expected. Over the next week, I watched her from a distance. She was untouchable, her laugh echoing through the hallways, her name popping up in every meeting invite. People started calling her the company's rising star. I started planning. Not revenge, not yet. Strategy. I stayed quiet, acted obedient, smiled when spoken to. I wanted her to think she'd won. Because the moment you make your enemy comfortable, that's when you can destroy them. Then came the day she crossed the final line. A Friday morning email, marked urgent. It was from Samantha, CCing the entire executive team. Subject: Project Phoenix original concept notes, Rachel's drafts. She'd attached my early work, stripped of context, making it look like I'd been copying her. In her message, she wrote, "While cleaning up files, I noticed Rachel's old drafts were almost identical to my presentation. I'm sure it's an innocent mix-up, but just wanted to flag this to avoid confusion moving forward." The audacity, the cruelty wrapped in fake professionalism. My hands trembled as I read it. In one email, she had painted me as a fraud. And that was when something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make her regret the day she decided to steal from me. Not by yelling. Not by gossip. But by destroying her with the same precision she used against me. Quiet, calculated, and very, very public. I used to think there was nothing more painful than heartbreak. But betrayal is worse. Because heartbreak breaks your heart. Betrayal breaks who you are. The Monday after Samantha's email, the entire office felt colder. People still smiled at me, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Conversations stopped when I entered the break room. The sound of laughter would fade the moment I sat down. I wasn't fired. That would have been mercy. Instead, I was ignored. No more invitations to strategy meetings. No more late-night brainstorms. Even the intern, Tyler, who used to ask for my advice, now went straight to Samantha. The company I had given years of my life to, the place that once felt like my second home, now treated me like a virus no one wanted to catch. One afternoon, I walked into the conference room by mistake. They were having a creative review, the kind I used to lead. Mr. Dalton was there, standing at the head of the table, smiling at Samantha. She was presenting again, another pitch, another original idea. And when she spoke, her words sounded eerily familiar. She stolen not just my work, but my voice. I froze by the doorway. Mr. Dalton noticed me. "Rachel," he said, half surprised, "did you need something?" I swallowed hard. "Sorry, wrong room." As I turned to leave, Samantha called out behind me. Actually, Dalton, Rachel helped me brainstorm this one too. She's been such a good support lately. Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. Everyone smiled, laughed. I walked out before they could see the tears burning behind my eyes. That night, I stayed in the office after everyone left. The city lights outside blurred through the glass. My desk, once cluttered with sticky notes, coffee mugs, and laughter, now looked like a grave. I opened my email, scrolling through the same message again and again. I'm sure it's an innocent mix-up. That single line had destroyed my credibility. I'd become a joke. And Samantha, she was being called a natural-born leader. The next day, Cora stopped by my desk. "Rachel," she said gently, "I think you should take some personal time, just until things calm down." Personal time. Corporate code for disappear until everyone forgets you exist. I forced a polite smile. "I'm fine, Cora, thanks." But I was. Every night, I went home to my silent apartment, opened my laptop, and stared at my old drafts, the proof of my work, and felt rage build like a pulse in my chest. Not loud, not explosive. Quiet, controlled. I realized something then. Samantha had used my strength against me, my professionalism, my calm, my refusal to fight dirty. She used my decency as a weapon. But what she didn't know was that even the calmest person has a breaking point. Weeks passed. Samantha's star kept rising. She got promoted to senior strategist, the position that was supposed to be mine. She threw a little celebration party in the office lounge, complete with champagne and catered sushi. I stayed at my desk, pretending to work. But she came to me anyway. She always did. "Ratch," she said, leaning on my cubicle wall, holding her glass like a trophy. "You didn't come to celebrate. Don't tell me you're still upset." I didn't look up. "Congratulations, Sam." Her tone dropped. "Look, I know things got messy, but this is business. You understand that, right?" I met her eyes. "Do you?" For a second, something flickered in her expression, a crack in the mask. Then she smiled again. "You're too sensitive. That's always been your problem." She turned and walked away, her laughter echoing down the hall. And that's when it happened, that shift inside me. The moment when humiliation turns into clarity. When hurt sharpens into purpose. I whispered to myself, "You want business? Fine, let's do business." I stopped trying to fix my image. I stopped explaining myself. Instead, I started watching. I paid attention to her patterns, how she talked, who she impressed, what files she accessed. She was reckless with her confidence, leaving trails everywhere. Late one night, while checking a shared drive, I noticed something strange, a folder labeled S. Blake, Q4 pitches. It wasn't password protected. I clicked it open. Inside were half-finished campaigns, including snippets clearly copied from other coworkers' work. Not just mine, everyone. She'd been stealing from multiple people, blending ideas, polishing them up, and presenting them as her own. And I suddenly knew what to do. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to argue. All I needed was time and evidence. Because revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It was about precision. And if there's one thing Samantha never learned, it's that the quiet ones remember everything. A week later, I got my chance. Samantha was invited to lead a pitch for a massive new client, one that could make or break her career. I smiled when I heard the news, because I already knew what I was going to do. This time, I wasn't going to play defense. This time, I'd build the perfect trap, one that would expose her, in front of everyone, the same way she humiliated me. And when it was over, she wouldn't just lose her job. She'd lose her mask. The office would finally see her for who she truly was. And I, the woman she tried to bury, would be the one holding the shovel. I stopped crying the night I realized I didn't want pity anymore. I wanted control. Samantha had taken my reputation, my work, my confidence, but she hadn't taken my mind. And that was her mistake. I started spending late nights in the office again, not to catch up on work, but to study. Every presentation Samantha submitted, every email she sent, every version of her campaigns on the shared drive. And the deeper I looked, the uglier it got. She'd been stealing from almost everyone. She'd taken Lara's design layout, Tyler's tagline concept, even a competitor's old pitch deck, and repackaged them as her own. But here's the thing about arrogance. It blinds you. She didn't even bother hiding the timestamps. Each file she uploaded had metadata, digital fingerprints that proved she'd copied and modified other people's work. I began to collect them quietly, folder by folder, screenshot by screenshot. Every piece neatly labeled and stored in my private drive, encrypted, time-stamped, impossible to refute. One evening, I was sitting in the empty office when the janitor, Mr. Lee, stopped by. He'd worked there longer than anyone, quiet, kind, always watching more than he said. He looked at me curiously. "Working late again, Rachel?" "Just tying up some loose ends," I said with a small smile. He nodded. "That one," he pointed to Samantha's corner office. "She reminds me of a young fox, always smiling, but her eyes, they hunt." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "You're not wrong." He gave me a knowing look. "Be careful. Foxes get trapped when they think they're too clever." I met his gaze. "That's the plan." The next morning, I started rebuilding my image. Not by defending myself, that would make me look desperate, but by delivering results quietly. I volunteered for small, unglamorous tasks, background research, data cleanup, proposal summaries. I made sure every piece of work I submitted was flawless, traceable, and time-stamped. People started noticing. "Rachel's still here," one coworker whispered in the break room. Another replied, "Yeah, and her reports are always on point. I don't know why she's not leading again." Exactly what I wanted them to think. Meanwhile, Samantha got busier and sloppier. Her rise had made her overconfident. She stopped double-checking things, started skipping proofreading, and began delegating tasks she didn't understand. One afternoon, Kara approached me. "Rachel, you've been quiet lately," she said cautiously. "You okay?" "I'm fine, just focusing on my work." She hesitated, then added softly, "Between you and me, some of Samantha's recent campaigns feel off, like recycled. I can't prove it, but..." I smiled slightly. "Maybe you'll get your proof soon." A few days later, an internal memo went around. Samantha Blake to present major pitch to Vantage Tech, Friday, 9 a.m. That was it, my moment. The Vantage Tech deal was worth millions. If Samantha landed it, she'd be untouchable. If she failed, she'd fall hard. So I decided to give her just enough rope to hang herself. I crafted a concept draft for a fake project under my old template, an idea titled Ecosphere. I left it intentionally incomplete, sitting in a shared folder Samantha had access to, with just enough brilliance in it to tempt her. And of course, she took the bait. The next morning, I saw a new file pop up in her personal folder. Vantage Tech Pitch Final, PPTX. When I opened it, there it was, my Ecosphere idea, repackaged under her name. Perfect. That Friday, the conference room buzzed with tension. Executives from both companies sat around the long glass table, Mr. Dalton at the head, Samantha at the front, beaming in her power suit, and me quietly sitting near the back, holding my laptop, calm for the first time in months. She began confidently, her voice smooth. "Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be walking you through our vision for Vantage Tech, a campaign we're calling Ecosphere." I watched Mr. Dalton's expression, impressed as always. But what he didn't know was that the real Ecosphere wasn't just an idea. It was bait. Halfway through her presentation, I leaned toward Kara and whispered, "Wait for it." Right on cue, Samantha clicked to the final slide, where she'd added a glossy animation she didn't understand. The video froze, then glitched. Lines of text appeared, Metadata from the original file I had embedded, revealing. Created by Rachel Owens. Date, 3 months ago. Modified by Samantha Blake. The room went silent. Samantha blinked at the screen, confused. Mr. Dalton frowned. Samantha, what's this? She stammered. Must be a technical glitch. I stood slowly, pretending to be surprised. Oh, that looks like one of my drafts. I created Ecosphere months ago as an internal test project. All eyes turned to me. Mr. Dalton's brows knitted. You did? Yes, I said calmly. I never finalized it because it wasn't ready, but I guess someone must have accessed my folder. You could hear a pin drop. Samantha's face drained of color. Rachel, that's not, Mr. Dalton cut her off. Samantha, please step outside for a moment. She hesitated, then walked out trembling. The rest was a blur. HR got involved. The tech team verified the timestamps. Everything pointed to her: plagiarism, data manipulation, stolen work. By Monday, her nameplate was gone from the door. And me. I was reinstated, quietly, without fanfare, but with respect that no one could fake. Kara came by my desk that afternoon. Guess the fox finally got trapped, she said with a grin. I smiled faintly. No traps, just the truth. That night, as I packed my bag, I noticed Mr. Lee mopping near the hallway. He looked up, eyes twinkling. So the storm's over. Not quite, I said softly, but the air's finally clear. He nodded. You didn't just survive, Rachel. You reminded them what honesty looks like. I smiled. And what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness? As I walked out, the city lights felt different, like they were finally shining for me again. The Monday after Samantha's fall was eerily quiet. Her office sat empty, blinds half closed, desk stripped clean except for a single forgotten mug that read Boss Babe. Poetic, really. People whispered in corners, trading theories like gossip currency. Some pretended to be shocked. Others confessed they'd always had a feeling. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Mr. Dalton called me into his office that morning. His tone was careful, as if he wasn't sure which version of me he was speaking to, the loyal employee or the woman who had just orchestrated one of the cleanest downfalls in company history. Rachel, he began, clearing his throat, I owe you an apology. I raised an eyebrow. For what exactly? For not seeing what was happening sooner, he admitted. You were treated unfairly, and I should have protected you. His words landed softer than I expected. I appreciate that, I said simply. He leaned forward. There's an opening senior strategist. It was meant for Samantha, but after recent events. I smiled faintly. You want me to take her place? He nodded. You earned it. There it was. The power she stole from me, now returned, not through sympathy, but through proof. I shook his hand, calm and steady. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. I'll make sure the next project reminds everyone what integrity looks like. By lunchtime, the office buzzed again. But this time, it was different. People smiled at me, real smiles, not the brittle ones from before. Tyler stopped by my desk. I just wanted to say, what you did, that was legendary, he said, grinning. Total justice. I chuckled softly. Justice doesn't need to be loud, Tyler. It just needs to be precise. He blinked, then nodded. Still, you got her good. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Rachel. The voice was shaky, quiet. Samantha. For a second, I didn't speak. I just listened to the sound of her breathing. Sam, I said finally, didn't expect to hear from you. I need to talk, she whispered. Please, just 5 minutes, not here across the street, that cafe we used to go to. I almost said no. But something inside me, that part that wanted closure, said yes. The cafe hadn't changed. Same warm lights, same cinnamon smell, same booth we'd shared back when we were friends. Samantha sat there, pale and disoriented. No blazer, no confidence, just a trembling woman trying to remember who she used to be. When she saw me, her eyes filled. "Rachel, I know you hate me, but please just let me explain." I sat down calmly. "Go ahead." She leaned forward, desperation bleeding through her voice. "I didn't mean for things to go that far. I wanted to prove I could do it too. Everyone loved you, and I got jealous, okay?" I studied her face. The irony was painful. The same woman who once accused me of being too sensitive now sat shaking, her voice cracking with guilt. "I made one bad choice," she continued, "and it kept snowballing. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. I never wanted to hurt you." I sipped my coffee slowly. "You didn't just hurt me, Sam. You humiliated me. You stole from me. You watched me crumble and still smiled about it." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I lost everything. My job, my credibility. I can't even get interviews now. Please, I need a reference. You're the only one who can help me." I let the silence hang. The same kind of silence she gave me when I begged her to tell the truth months ago. Finally, I said, "You know what the difference is between us, Sam. When you hurt me, I didn't ask anyone to fix it for me. I rebuilt myself." She flinched. "Rachel, please." I stood up, dropping a few bills on the table. "You said once that I was too nice," I said quietly. "You were right, I was, but not anymore." Her voice cracked. "So that's it, you're just going to walk away." I looked at her one last time. "No, Samantha, I already did." Then I turned and walked out, not angry, not triumphant, just free. The sun hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. For months, I'd imagined revenge as fire burning, explosive, dramatic. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like flames. It felt like peace. There was no satisfaction in seeing her broken. The real victory was knowing I didn't need her downfall to feel whole. I'd won the moment I stopped needing to prove anything. Back at the office, the next few weeks were quiet and steady. I took over Samantha's projects, rebuilt trust with clients, and created campaigns that carried my voice again, authentic, unborrowed, unapologetic. During a Friday meeting, Mr. Dalton clapped his hands. "Team," he said, "I just got word the Vantage Tech campaign is performing beyond expectations. Rachel's strategy has set a new record." Applause filled the room. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. Kara leaned over and whispered, "You're the golden girl again." I smiled softly. "No, just gold, no label needed." That night, I stayed late again, but not to work. I stood by the office window, watching the city lights flicker below, and thought about how far I'd come. The same office that once broke me had become the stage for my rebirth. The same woman who tried to erase me had, without knowing, written my comeback story. And that's when I realized revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about reclamation. Reclaiming your worth, your name, your power. And once you've done that, no one can take it again. They say revenge ends when the other person loses. But for me, it ended when I won myself back. After Samantha was gone, the office didn't magically become perfect. The politics, the egos, the competition, they still lived in the walls. But something did change. People started talking differently, watching differently. Especially the women. I saw it first in Lara, the designer who used to whisper her ideas, afraid of being dismissed. One afternoon, she walked into a meeting and presented her concept like she owned the room. When someone interrupted her, she didn't shrink back. She looked them straight in the eye and said, "Please let me finish." And she did, brilliantly. Afterward, she caught me in the hallway. "Rachel," she said shyly, "I saw what you did with Samantha. You stood up for yourself, and you didn't lose your grace. It made me realize we don't have to stay quiet to survive." Her words warmed something deep inside me. That was when I knew this was bigger than me. A few weeks later, HR launched something new, the Women's Integrity Initiative. A mentorship program designed to protect creative credit, encourage collaboration, and prevent workplace sabotage. Mr. Dalton approached me about leading it. "We need someone who understands what it means to fight fair," he said. "Someone who's lived it." I almost laughed. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he replied. "You changed how people think here, Rachel. We'd like you to make it permanent." So I did. Every Thursday afternoon, I hosted sessions with junior staff, mostly women, a few men too, where we talked openly about ambition, jealousy, and the silent wars people fight at work. The first time the room was quiet, nervous smiles, darting eyes. But I started with my story. I told them everything: how I trusted someone I thought was my friend, how she betrayed me, and how I rebuilt myself piece by piece. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't make myself a saint. "I made mistakes too," I said. "I thought kindness meant silence. It doesn't. Kindness without boundaries isn't virtue. It's vulnerability." You could feel the room shift. Heads nodded. A few women wiped tears. By the end of that first session, people stayed behind just to talk, not about projects, but about fear. Fear of being stolen from. Fear of being blamed. Fear of not being enough. And every time, I told them the same thing. Your voice is your signature. Protect it. Never let anyone sign your name on their success. One afternoon, Cara stopped by after one of the sessions. She smiled. "You know, when you first joined this place, I thought you were just another overachiever. Now, you're the backbone of this company." I laughed softly. "Backbone's a strong word." She shrugged. "Strong's what you are." I realized then that revenge had quietly transformed into leadership. And leadership, the kind that came from scars instead of titles, lasted longer than any victory speech. A few months later, the Ecosphere campaign I had originally created, the one Samantha stole, won an industry award for innovation. When my name was announced at the ceremony, I felt my heart swell. Not because of the trophy, but because of what it represented. I stepped up to the stage, the spotlight soft on my face, and said, "This award isn't just for me. It's for every woman who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or silenced in a boardroom. It's proof that integrity might take longer to win, but it always wins in the end." The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was deep. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. A few weeks later, I got an email. No subject line, no sender name, just a message. "I saw your speech. I'm glad you're doing well. I'm trying to start over, too." Yes. I stared at it for a while. Then I smiled. I didn't reply. Not out of hatred, out of closure. Because forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's just the act of moving forward. By spring, the mentorship program had grown. The interns I once helped were now mentoring others. The company started promoting based on teamwork, not politics. And me, I stopped working late nights. I finally had a life outside the office again. I started painting, something I hadn't done since college. I took weekend trips, I laughed more, I breathed easier. One Friday, as I was leaving, Tyler called out, "Hey, Rachel, we're grabbing drinks, you in?" I turned, smiling. "You know what? Yeah, I'm in." For the first time in a long time, the office didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a place of new beginnings. Later that night, walking home under the streetlights, I thought about how strange life was. I'd started this journey chasing revenge. But what I found was power, the quiet kind that doesn't need to prove itself. Samantha's betrayal had once defined me. Now it was just a chapter. The rest of the book, that was mine to write. It's strange, isn't it, how silence changes meaning over time. When Samantha first betrayed me, silence was my prison. Now it's my peace. Back then, every quiet moment was filled with questions. Why did she do it? How could she? What did I do wrong? Now, I don't need the answers anymore. Because I finally learned something. Some betrayals aren't about you being weak. They're about someone else being too small to handle your strength. Months have passed since everything ended. The company moved on, the people changed, and new stories replaced mine. But every now and then, I still catch someone whisper my name, not out of gossip anymore, but respect. And every time that happens, I smile. Not because I crave validation, but because I know I earned it, honestly, quietly my way. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I stayed back at my desk to finish some notes. The office was empty, just the soft hum of computers and the faint scent of old coffee. For a moment, I stood by the glass wall and looked out over the city. So many lights, so many stories, so many women probably fighting silent battles of their own. I wished I could tell each of them what I'd learned the hard way. So maybe this is what I'd say, if anyone out there ever needed to hear it. If someone betrays you, don't waste your life proving them wrong. Prove yourself right. Don't let their jealousy turn you bitter. Let it turn you wise. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't about hurting them back. It's about standing taller than the version of yourself they tried to break. A few weeks later, our department held a small get-together for new hires. One of the interns, a nervous young woman named Ava, came up to me after the meeting. She twisted her hands nervously. "Rachel, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. She hesitated. "Is it true, the story about you and that woman who took credit for your work?" I smiled gently. "It's true." She bit her lip. "How did you not fall apart?" I thought about that for a moment. "I did fall apart," I said softly. "But I didn't stay there. I decided I'd rather rebuild myself than let someone else define me." She nodded slowly, eyes shining with understanding. And right then, I realized that's the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Not the scandal, not the revenge, but the lesson. That no matter what someone takes from you, your ideas, your dignity, your peace, you can always take it back. Not through rage, through rebirth. When I left that night, the sky was painted gold and violet. The kind of evening that whispers, "You made it through." I walked to my car, the city lights reflecting on the windshield, and smiled to myself. Because I knew the version of me who once cried in the break room was gone. And in her place stood a woman who had learned how to rise. A woman who no longer needed revenge. Because she'd become her own redemption. If someone at your workplace ever made you feel small, if someone ever took what was yours and made you question your worth, remember this. You don't need to fight fire with fire. You just need to stay long enough to rise above the ashes. One day, they'll look at you and realize the woman they tried to break became the woman they could never be. So hold your head high. Keep your work honest. And never apologize for shining. Because when you rise quietly, your success becomes the loudest revenge of all.
If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen play out?